yo, it's your boy Engine Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We got the usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We also have Spigs 18 or Anthony. And Dean. I heard that bigger is always better. Is that true?
Well, I really think that depends on who you ask. Speaking of that, I think we should talk about bigger being better or worse or indifferent. And we're going to talk about that in the idea or the conceptualization of when you put together a group to play, party size. So we're going to talk about that today. Anthony, why don't you just, take the reins and let everybody know how we're going to handle this discussion today.
All right, guys. So I guess we'll break it down this way. We're I think it's the general conception amongst most gamers that the sweet spot in gaming is 4 to 5 players. Would you guys agree with that?
No.
No, also.
Okay, but for this video, we're gonna say that it is. So the average group is anywhere between 4 and 5 players. So we're gonna discuss and break down what is a larger group. So we're gonna say anything from 6 or above players, and we'll talk about what are the perks, what grinds our gears as players and GMs for those that size, such large size of group, and then we'll also break it down into a smaller group. Like those 1 to 2 player groups, and we'll discuss all the perks and the benefits and disadvantages to having a group that size as a player and as a GM. So I think most GMs find larger groups more difficult, even though I think our group discussion may tend to steer it differently. But so I think we should start our discussion with larger groups. So this is a group that has anywhere between 6 players or higher. So could some of you guys tell me what are some of the advantages from being a player in a group that size?
Go for it.
As I've only played in a handful of games. Apparently, I don't really remember many of them, according to Anthony. But one of the advantages just not even having played in one or recalling playing in one. A really strong advantage is you don't have a lot of pressure on you to think of everything, any solutions or whatever have you. You have a team. You have 5 other people or more to work with towards a solution, or many solutions if you have many problems, depending on what's going on in the story or whatever have you. And again, it also brings a lot of different dynamics to the table, which can be fun. A lot of different characters to play off of, and those are, I think, one or two of the biggest advantages to big parties.
Mm-hmm. And kind of echoing in the same venue or vein that Al was talking about. Yeah, as a member of a larger group, it's like you have more skill sets and more stuff to springboard off of to come up with something, that's possibly dynamic or innovative, things of that nature. You can be inspired. There's a lot more places to draw from. Also, a larger group, especially for a new player, can kind of give you a little bit of leeway to kind of blend into the background a bit and do a lot of observation, but yet and still be part of the fun. So that's something that I see. And as a GM,
hold on, I didn't give mine.
He's just trying to push along. I don't care what you have to say about it. Now as a GM,
video's over. You guys kind of hit the nail on the head, but I think that a larger group covers all the MMO
tropes,
all the types. You have, when you have a larger group, you're going to have your DPS, your range DPS, you're going to have your healer, you're going to have your face, you're going to have your melee combat guy. So basically, you know that you could concentrate on one specific area with a larger group and not have to have this multifaceted character that has to do everything okay but nothing great. So when you're developing a character for a larger group, you know that you could pick a specific style of gameplay you want to emphasize and not have to worry about, is this character going to be too one-dimensional because, all the other bases are going to be covered with everyone else.
To put it bluntly, it would be the perfect opportunity to min-max.
Yes.
It would be the perfect opportunity to min-max. You become the iconic fighter or the paragon wizard. When you say those words, those characters, that's what you get to be in a larger group. So yeah.
It makes a lot of sense because, again, like you guys are saying, when there's other people who can, let's say, lockpick instead of you, or who can persuade people instead of you, you don't have to have those skills, so you can focus on skills that enhance the definition of whatever class or character you're playing, and you become that paragon or definition of that character. And yeah, you really get to play a strong feeling of that character.
And I think this is why I love we don't script our episodes, because Dean just said something that I didn't really think about. The introvert and extrovert people at the table. It's a lot easier to hide those deficiencies when you have multiple players. So if you're weak in role playing, chances are there's going to be players that are at the table with a larger group that could be able to pick up the slack for that. And if you love role playing and there's players at the table that are more introverted and don't want to, you able to pick up the slack for them, or vice versa. If you're not a good strategist, chances are someone at the table is going to be good at strategy. So that was a great point Dee just brought up.
And not to say slack in a negative way, because people who like introverted players, they're not like it's never a bad thing to have a more quiet person at the table. And a larger group does actually help that, because an introverted person might feel a little more awkward in a smaller group because there's two introverted people out of the three at the table, and there's only one guy talking, and now they might feel a little awkward about it. Whereas in a group of 6+, again, maybe there's two others there, but the four others are happy to role play again, and that's
just it. You got a person that they won't be intimidated because the spotlight is shining on them too much.
Yes.
And I guess that can kind of segue us into talking about the GM portion.
No, now we go into the hindrances. We talk about what are the positives as a player. What are the hindrances? What annoys you as a player if you're a player in a large group?
All right, so you want to start? I saw you winding up.
I think the biggest problem when you're a player in a large group is that everything takes forever. So be prepared to there's going to be long gaps in between your actions. So if there's a combat and there's 6 or 7 people at the table, you're going to do your action, and you might have to wait 15-20 minutes before the spotlight gets
back around.
And so if you're not the sort of person that is willing to take a back seat to others and allow them to play and do their actions, big groups might not be for you.
That is very true.
What or the guy Anthony had to contend with the one time who wanted to play everybody's character for them.
Yeah. Yeah, this might not be the game for you.
I mean, that was exactly the point I was going to make, in that one player or maybe even 2 players might overly try to take the spotlight. Like, even when the GM sets up a scene that looks like it's specifically set up for 1 or 2 other players, you might have that 1 or 2 other players. There's, again, with the bigger group size, there's always a bigger chance of if you haven't played with all of them before, there's a bigger chance that there's going to be some toxicity at the table as well. Again, but it depends on if you've played with them before or not. But again, what I was saying was,
are you saying that the jerk ratio goes up the more players are involved at the table?
I'm saying it's just a possibility game at that point. That's all it is. I'm not saying that there's more jerks in big games. I'm just saying it's a possibility game. It's just more people, more chance. That's all it is. But anyways, oh boy! But either way, in a game, you can have 2 people trying to steal the spotlight. And that'll really detract from everything going forward. It makes the game take longer because you're still trying to fit in that screen time for those people, and it just doesn't happen.
My biggest thing, I'm looking at it as a player, that I would think would be the negative would be that I don't think enough stuff will have the same amount of time to just happen organically. Everybody's going to be fighting for a shot. Because especially if you get dealing with a group of people who do know each other, a group who's been playing together a while, then they're like rats on a piece of cheese. Everybody's chomping for a bit. Um, that's one thing that would grind my gears as a player. Another thing that would probably drive me up a wall as a player would be the person who's impatient. When everybody else is doing their best, to be patient and so on and so forth. Those things like work my nerves because everybody's at the table for the same reason. You know, the social convention of what the game is about. This is what you're there for, whether you know a Cypher or any other game. A narrative game versus uh, a much more crunchy game. So
I mean, I think that's great points, and it leads to, I guess, what the next evolution of this conversation is as a player, right? What can you do to ease the process of a bigger game? Like, what are some of the things a player can do to make a large 7 or 8 person game run smoothly?
I have an obvious
I
one.
got it.
Oh,
Uh, well, my biggest thing would be pay attention. Pay attention. You know, and try to be concise. You guys are there 9 times out of 10. If you're playing with a big party, especially like we're talking about 6 or more, that's convention time. So you've got a 3-4 hour block of time that you're going to be at this table and you got to deal with these people. So I think paying attention and being polite, giving everybody a chance. Don't try to hog the spotlight. Don't, try to run everybody's character, and be ready with your actions. That's me. That's what I think eases the table.
How about you?
I mean,
I was gonna say,
I was gonna basically say exactly that, but I can piggyback off it a little bit and say that in a bigger game, especially if you're at a convention or with very limited time or whatever have you, but time is always pretty much limited. So especially in a bigger game, there's more chances for people to try to basically derail the story or not like most of the time GMs are setting up a story or some have you like unless you're playing a very sandboxy game and he asks y'all what y'all doing. I always think in the headset of a one shot where you're trying to tell a story in a certain time frame. And if you're a player in a big game in a one shot or whatever have you, in a timed game, if you're trying to derail the game by like following like, oh, I want to investigate, town of the west instead of going to the town of the east, like you're sending us to, like that's just gonna slow everything down and it's just gonna get everyone else frustrated because unless there's everybody wants to derail the story and go that way, then whatever. But then that's not really a derailing. But yeah, anything that sort of takes away from the main narrative.
take the bait, but Guppy. Take the bait, Guppy. When the fisherman throws the hook on the line with the worm on it, sometimes, you may know it's not, the right thing to do, but just to keep the story moving forward, your little Guppy has to take that worm every once in a while.
Exactly.
I do think it with a big group like that, if you're running a campaign, it's sort of different because I think with a big group, you can derail a little bit in a campaign setting because you're going to play another day. But I absolutely agree with you in a con setting or a one shot. You should, try to keep the derailing to a minimum. But I think my best advice to be helpful as a player for a large group is know your spells and abilities, know your spells. First of all, with a group that size, you shouldn't expect the GM to know every ability by heart or every spell by heart. So when you say announcing, we'll use Cypher system as an example. When you're announcing that you're doing a specific ability, be prepared to explain the ability. So there's no, hey, I'm gonna look up this ability or discuss it. Tell the GM exactly what it does. Make his life as easy as possible. Let him know how many points does it cost off your pool. If you're applying effort, announce it beforehand. Don't wait for the GM to ask you any questions. When you respond with everything answered. So it goes with Dean's paying attention. Know your ability and pay attention to what the person's doing before you. So know your turn in the order. Know that, hey, I'm going next, because it's like what we said earlier. Time is critical with big games. Everything takes longer. So if someone does an action, be prepared to immediately follow him with your action.
And that actually reminded me of another really good point for being helpful at a big game if you're a player, to make the GM's and everyone's life easier. During a big game, there's obviously going to be a lot of stuff going on. Usually, most scenes involve the direct interaction of maybe 3 or 4 characters. So let's say you're a player who has a question or something. Ask the player next to you who's also not in the scene. And as a player, you should be willing to answer these questions. It'll make, because then they don't have to bother the GM. Hey, they can ask you, hey, what does this ability do? Or what does this mean on my Cypher? Another player can explain that for you. And if you're, again, a new player, don't be afraid to ask. And as a veteran player, be ready to answer those questions, or offer it at the beginning of the game. Hey, if we're in the middle of the game, you have a question, feel free to reach out to me, so we don't have to bother the GM with that during his storytelling.
Well, you just hit that. I was actually going to say, establish that particular idiom at the beginning with your GM and your other players at the table. And the only reason I say that is because not every GM is going to pick up on what's going on, and they're gonna, are you metagaming? Are you paying attention? That type of thing. You don't want to step on people's toes. You have other people at the table. Everybody has their own ways, but that's just a quick discussion. That should be the 5 minutes before the game starts. Talk to your GM, talk to your fellow players, figure out who's new. And that's something else. The new guy. Please situate yourself between 2 experienced players. Use them to your advantage. GMs, same thing. Set your table up with everything you need, with all right, your place.
These we'll lead straight into the GM questions, because I know you want to go straight to the GM advice. So we'll go straight to the GM advice. Go ahead, Dean. The floor is yours.
Well, we're talking about what grinds our gears first, right?
Okay. Whatever you want, baby. Whatever you want.
Well, no, let's start the same way we did with what we like.
All right.
As far as a big group, as far as for campaigns, and you kind of said that. That's why when I like a big group, I don't care if it's, I run up to 12 people in a campaign setting. I think 14. But at any rate,
I can't imagine running for 14 people.
But what's cool about running that big massive group was that, we were meeting twice a month. It wasn't every month. It was maybe every 2 months, 3 months that I would actually have the entire group, with the exception of the first 2 or 3 sessions. I'd have 7 1 week, I'd have 9 another week, and it worked out well because I was able to tell a very cohesive story, and it was kind of like a TV show. It was really cool because I had the players, in and out, and it worked perfectly because they would come to a session and be like, okay, I'm not going to be here next 2 sessions. Perfect. And I let the group know, this week, such and such is going on and such life. So, this character was going to get their time in, it was going to play out, and you could build on that canvas. That's one of the things I like about a big group. Another thing about a big group, again, to me, I'm one of those GMs who like player information. If we're playing in a campaign, I want a background story. Give me stuff, and that is fodder for creation, and it makes the game also more intimate to the people. So It's
I don't know if I would agree with that with a large group, though. I'm sorry. I think that with a larger group, with like 7, 8, 9 people, I think you have less of an opportunity to use backgrounds because
Unless you establish like predetermined like groups that they can all be a part of and have backstories within the same organization or area or whatever have you.
Well, that's the kind of stuff, and that's what I'm saying. Though I would take what was given and use it in specific ways to do that. Giving everybody a chance to feel important, giving everybody a chance to, it made my life easier because I didn't have to make stuff up to make them feel good when I needed to. You know what I'm saying? So it was just notes. It was tons of notes for me. That was the thing I enjoyed most about the big group. Now, if it came to a big group for a one shot or something, I'm gonna just say it outright. Hell no.
You see, like I think I'm a little bit in a different camp. What I like about big groups is, I think with a big group, when you have 7, 8, 9 guys or gals, I'm sorry, if a group of that size, I think the story takes precedent over the PCs. I think your prep is less because there's less scenes you got to account for because everything takes longer to do. What normally a 4-person group would do a combat. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that for every person past 5 or 6, add 10 minutes to whatever scene you're doing. So if you normally have a group that has 5 players in it, and then you add 3 more, an hour scene becomes an hour and a half to complete. Because every additional player adds 10 minutes to the overall, because it's just going to happen. That's just what it is. It's not even bad players. It's just with more people involved, there's more time being wasted. So I think that with a larger group, story takes precedence over PC, where you can't necessarily, especially in a one shot, you can't necessarily concentrate on individual players' backgrounds, their stories.
Right.
You have to concentrate on your overall story.
Well, no, I agree with you. That's what I'm saying. For campaigns, for me, something that I knew was ongoing is useful. Other side of the coin, a one shot, yes, it's a specific narrative that you're trying to build. And even with that, like with a larger group, if I'm doing a one shot, I'll be honest with you, I'm probably going to make NPCs. We're not even going to worry about you making characters.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's going to be, pre-gens sitting there for you to choose from. So, we can get this thing moving.
I think we steered off because I was going to say what I liked. I'm sorry, I took the conversation to the left. But what I like about big groups is that with so many players and so many people doing actions, you have to prep way less. And I hardly prep at all. But since everything takes so much time, I know if I have 7, 8 players, I only need, for a 3-hour session, I only need like 3 or 4 major scenes because everything is going to take so long. When you have a group of 3 or 4 players, you have to prep way more because what in your mind you might think, oh, this is going to take 45 minutes to accomplish. It might get done in 10 minutes. It might get done in 15 minutes. And I'm already a minimal prepper as it is. So if I have to prep even less, it's always a good thing for me. So I think that's the one thing I enjoy about large groups as a GM.
One thing I enjoy, not that I don't think I've ever run. Anthony, did you say that I ran a game with 6 people?
You ran 6.
Yeah, you ran 6.
I don't recall, man. But either way, one thing I do enjoy about larger groups as a GM, or as a GM in general, but with a larger group you see it more, is the creative solutions to things and the collaborative teamwork. Because there are more people at the table, there are more ideas tossed out onto the table, and then more takes on one idea because there's more eyes looking at it, tweaking the initial idea. So sometimes some crazy stuff happens in games because there's so many people tweaking the one idea. It turns into something completely different than what it originally was. And it's always fun to see that process. Always fun to see the craziness involved with these creative solutions and ideas. And I always enjoy that greatly. And again, a bigger group just encourages it further because there's just more people involved.
That's a great point.
Nice. Yeah, I agree.
So now that we talked about the perks, what are the stuff that could grind your gears? And then I guess we'll lead straight into what grinds your gears as a GM, and what are some of the tips you could give someone that's GMing for a group of say 7 or 8 people?
See, this is a double edge for me because what grinded my gears about a large group, and then there's now what grinds my gears because before the inception of social media, cell phone, technology the way it is today, you didn't have that level of distraction, and we're all guilty of it, even myself, big group, no focus on me. You know what? I'll pick up my phone. Don't take too long because I might veg out on you. So that's the current thing that really works a nerve. In the old days, it was side banter. Somebody would start a conversation and really not be paying attention. So they would not know. So then I would have to recap what happened with the last 3 people. So you just added another 20 minutes to the whole narrative because you weren't listening. So it's I guess it's all the same thing. Not listening is the biggest thing. You got to pay attention. That's what I said as a player. I gave you that advice as a player. Please pay attention as a GM. So one of my biggest solutions to that is that normally if I know we're going to play with a big group, I will just, flat out to begin and say, listen, phones on silent or, vibrate or something, let's, if it's an emergency, that's fine. But please, no phones at the table, no tablets unless you're using it as your character sheet or stuff like that. And I think that's like the biggest thing.
Is that a conversation you have at the beginning of every session? Or
Yep.
is that a conversation that occurs in like a session 0 and then never happens again? Or?
Well, no, I'll have it at session 0, of course, and then it's always like a quick reminder, along with the recap. If I got to recap, especially if it's going to be an ongoing thing, for one shots, not as stringent on it, because again, it's a one shot, it's happening, it's a one and done. I don't have to see you people again, and if you miss something during a one shot, it's not my loss, it's yours.
That's something that I feel like I'm lacking as, and I run for strangers all the time, and I notice a lot of people give that advice that you should state table rules before, and I always feel a little, even though I know it's sound advice, I always feel like I don't want to be that shitty guy like, hey, here's my rules to play before you play with me. You really should do it though. I
guess I don't feel bad about it. It's because it's the way I deliver it.
Mm-hmm.
I say, hey guys, listen, let's do some quick housekeeping before we get the game going. All right. At the end of the day, we're all here to have fun. That's what I'm trying to facilitate here. So let's have fun. Couple of simple things. Let's keep our phones down. Blah, blah, let's focus on the game. You got some new players at the table. I'm going to need you experienced people to help us. Boom. Okay. Anybody got anything for me? Anything I should need to know? Whatever the case may be. You know what? Oh, don't forget there's an X card. Just give it to them and give it to them in a real conversational manner.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I know I have to make more of a conscious effort to be proactive, to set some table rules beforehand. And I give that advice all the time, but I don't rarely follow my own advice.
And it's kind of hard to enforce that sort of thing, like the phone thing, in online games, voice only, unless they're like actually making noise with their phone, which most of the time most people have their phones on silent. But again, as long as they're it's hard. You can't really police it online, but as long as everyone, even if you know they're on their phone, is actively still participating and not causing a disturbance in the flow of the game, it's not an issue.
Right.
As long as you don't disturb the flow of the game. That's my biggest thing. Just don't disturb the flow. You can use your phone, you can chat or whatever. As long as you're listening and responding and know what's going on. Because some people can multitask. Some people can't. Some people just can't. Some people can't. Like, know your limits as a player.
I think a lot of people think they can multitask, but doesn't necessarily mean that they can.
No, all right, so know for sure that you can multitask.
Because
I look at it this way. I mean, I know for a fact, yes, I can multitask, but I also know I can become distracted. I can go, I'm multitasking.
That's me right there.
I'm multitasking and I'm good. But then all of a sudden, one little thing over here like becomes really interesting. So my focus goes from
So one thing I like to do, this is a little side topic-y, but either way, one thing I like to do to stay focused while still not remaining too focused on a game, especially when there's a lot of players and you're not really getting to do much in the story itself, like your character's basically just standing around. So what I like to do, and people on the server might know what I'm talking about, I like to doodle the characters from the game. And it's not too big of a distraction because you're focusing on one thing. It's not browsing through a media feed or whatever have you. And it still keeps you immersed in a way because you're thinking about the characters. You think, oh, what does this person look like? How would they pose for a picture with maybe this other character? You know, it still keeps you in the universe of what you're doing. And I enjoy that a lot.
That's a great piece of advice.
Even if you're a bad artist. If you've seen my drawings, you know that I'm not the most amazing artist, but I still enjoy doing it. Because, again, it keeps you in the mindset of everything.
But even that being said...
you even draw pictures of scenes, too.
Yes.
But, and not only that, but that's even a cool way, too. I can, kind of expand on that because I know I've done it, especially on online games. Somebody will make mention of something and it'll trigger an idea or a thought, that my character might be in tune with or something. So I'll look it up.
Yeah, find an image.
I'll find an image online or I'll find some anecdotal, statements. There was one game I was playing, my character was a philosopher. And we were playing online, so I spent the entire game, listening to what's going on, but looking up quotes. So he was consistently spitting out philosophical anecdotes, and those are times that I don't care about the quote unquote distraction because you're not really distracted. Again, it's that multitasking because you're still on task, you're still listening, you're still preparing for what's coming next. You're preparing,
and you're still in the mindset of the universe, the immersion. Like,
right.
You don't really...
You're still in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So I think that is cool, and I think that's a sound piece of advice that we can throw out there to the universe.
Yeah, that was a super sidetrack, but
to go back to large groups bring us back.
I can
corral
it back. So we were talking about things about large groups that we dislike. Yes. So as the GM. Yeah, as a GM. Yeah. So one thing, again, I don't recall running for many big player number games, but one thing that I find, or theoretically would find frustrating, because I don't remember finding it frustrating before, is trying to plan out a story that gives enough spotlight time to the players while still maintaining that 3 or 4 hour window. It might become a task in and of itself. Like you kind of lose focus of other things that might make the game fun. Whether would have been less people, where you don't have to focus on trying to make sure everybody has that, moment in the spotlight. And again, I don't remember planning my game, so I don't.
That actually leads into what I actually when we first started, me and Dean were talking about this yesterday when I first came up with this idea about doing this video. And at first I was like, I don't have that much experience. But to be honest, I think all my experience in the last year and a half has been running for over 6 people. it seems like for some reason every time I post a game, I ask for 5 people, and before you know it, there's 7, 8 people playing. Like, even the last few games, the Lucas Sleeps was the
Yeah, how
fifth.
many players was that?
6.
That was 6?
Yeah.
My memory, oh my goodness.
So there's I actually have a lot of opinions on this and a lot of tips. And one of the problems, I think with a group that size, communication is the key, especially. And I think there's 2 types of scenarios, right? I think there's a big difference between a campaign and a one shot when it comes to large groups. There's like a crater size difference.
Oh, absolutely.
When I look at one shots, it's I got a story to tell. I got so many people. I might throw in some like little connections to characters, but my key important aspect of my game is to make sure I tell this story. Make sure this story, and you guys both know time management is like something that I'm obsessed with in all my games, and so I know I'm gonna hit my I'm gonna hit my middle arc at a specific time in the game. I'm gonna hit my last final scene at a specific time in the game. So I have to concentrate on the story. But for a campaign, I look at it like Star Trek Next Generation. You pick 1 or 2 players and you concentrate that session on their story arc. Because with so many players, you got to do the Geordie session, you got to do the Captain Picard session, you got to do the Data session, but you can't concentrate on everybody. And the players have to be accepting to know that, hey, this session's going to be about Dean. This session's going to be about Al. Because it's not going to work otherwise. It's going to be like a jumble mess. If you're trying to concentrate on more than 2 people per session.
Well, that's what I was saying, though. That's what I was saying about with the big group, having that background information and letting everybody know, this is going to be such and such spotlight episode,
Like that has to be relayed.
Oh, yeah, you have to do that. And I think it works well when people catch on that, okay, I'm the co-star, I'm not the bright shining light in the room tonight.
But tomorrow you could be the bright shining light. And
right.
Yes.
Everybody knew their turn was coming, and it's crazy because that big group I ran that group for like 7-8 years.
Jeez,
it was awesome.
All right, here's my other tips because I have quite a few. Have a 10-second rule. When it's your turn, act in 10 seconds or I'm moving on. We do not have time for someone to think about what they're doing. And trust me, it might sound like rude or obnoxious the first time you do it, but they'll get the point. Like if I go to you, I go, hey, Dean, what do you got to do? I don't know. Al, it's your turn. What are you doing? If you can't wait, give them 10 seconds, even count down if you have to. So after a few times you do that, they'll get the point.
Because, and also, again, what Anthony was saying, like when you think about it as rude, it's not really rude of you to give them 10 seconds to respond. It's rude of them to not take the time while other people are going to think about what they're going to do, then say it when it's their turn. Because
that's a good point. When you announce someone, state who the person is going next. So my example would be like, Dean, it's your go. Al, you up on deck.
Yeah, exactly. If they have some prior knowledge, they can prepare. And if they're not prepared when it's their turn, they're being rude.
That's why I said that's what I was saying before. You gotta be in the game. And if you're the first person, okay, fine. If you're the first person in the situation, the first person is being, caught out, I might give you, 30 seconds, just because you got to start the ball rolling. But everybody else, of course, is really going to be feeding off of that place. You're feeding off of what started between you in the situation at hand, the situation laid out for the GM. So, just take those things into account. Don't, Yeah,
that is a good point because newer players might need a little more time to think, and it's always good to take that into consideration. This shouldn't be a hard and fast, steady. This player's first game ever.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be like, "Hey, Tessa, you didn't say we're done." Like you want to always take that stuff into consideration.
I'm not assuming that.
No,
it's like
I know.
I'm assuming
it's someone who's knowledgeable and knows what they're doing.
And to run a game.
Yes.
The other rule is with a big group as a GM, with so many players acting and such a gap in between actions of players, you should do mid-game recaps. Like if you're having there was a big fight scene that took an hour and a half. In order to get everybody back focused into, okay, the fight's over, we're moving on to a more RP scene, or we're picking up the pieces and resting. Do a mini recap to let them know what happened in the last hour and a half. It doesn't have to be a 20-minute recap, or you could even get the players to do a recap. But you should, with a group that size, you should have a mid-session recap, just so all the players could know, okay, let's refocus. If I wasn't paying attention, you actually letting them know what's going on.
And as a quick GM tip to throw in there on top of your tip, this is a good time if you're asking your players to recap. This is a good time to reward in Cypher system. Reward EXP. Like, hey, you did a recap. Here's some EXP. Yeah. You were paying attention for the last hour and a half before the fight. Like, here's an EXP. And then on top of that, another system, let's say D&D, here's an inspiration. Like, you earn, like, here you get to re-roll or whatever. I forget what inspiration does. But roll advantage or whatever the hell it is. But yeah, it's a good opportunity to reward those player rewards at that time. What's so funny?
I just love you, Al. It's like whatever the hell it is. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I don't know what D is. I don't play that. I haven't played that game since like the last time I tried to run it all those years, like 2 years ago, whatever it was.
I'm just saying. It's just I know and that's the whole player. Whatever the hell it is.
I know it does something with dice rolls. But either way, it's a good way to reward those points to players.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point.
I completely derailed a train of thought. But did you have any more advice on larger games?
Yeah, I have one last bit of advice, and you totally did derail me.
He was on a roll.
You see, you could tell our videos are not scripted because we lose focus.
Not scripted, not edited, and that's our motto.
Yeah.
And we're a small.
All right, so what did I say? I said, okay, yeah, we had to do a mid recap. Yes. And the last bit of advice I would give is when you have a group this size and everyone wants the spotlight, write down everyone's name and as a personal chart, see who's been involved in RP during the session. So you could physically check off, hey, John's been in 2 solo scenes, Mary's been in 1. So you keep a mental note. And here's one other thing that I just thought about right now. Assign jobs to players. Make it a whole lot easier for you. Make John in charge of the initiative order. Make Dean in charge of the conditions of the players. Because with so many people, you might not remember the initiative order on everyone.
Yes.
You might not remember those things. It's a little easier online because you could have it set up online.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say just another piece of advice on top of advice. Well, with your marking down who was in what scene or whatever have you. Color code your markings if you don't want to write solo or duo scene or whatever. Have red mean a red line means they were in a solo scene. A blue line mean they were in a group scene, or a blue line means they were in a duo scene or whatever have you, and that'll help you keep better track without having to write all that stuff down. I like writing notes, so that's
another thing about what Anthony's talking about. That also keeps people in the game.
Yep.
Yes.
That keeps everybody in the game because now I have a responsibility to maintain a specific aspect of the game. So, that helps with the whole, keeping them focused.
and immersed because they're thinking about what's going on and having to keep track of it.
So you find with larger groups, it's more of holding your players' attention. It's a lot more difficult a task as opposed to a normal sized group. Like it's something that you have to make a conscious effort to do.
Yeah, because again, we're GMs, but that's nothing but a player. That's nothing but a very, very big player. And, we can become immersed in scenes just as easily as the player, and especially if you got a good RPer, somebody who can engage. So, yeah, I think it's a great deal. It helps in both directions.
Oh, and it's funny you say that. It made me think of this. Don't fall in love with NPCs with large groups, because chances are somebody's going to want to
kill
stab
them. You're going to kill them.
No matter, they could be 6 people in the group that love the guy or gal, but that one person is like, I'm stabbing this person as soon as I get a chance.
I was just saying, and you always got the person in the group. There's always a person who comes to a role-playing game, a social convention, who wants to play the Dark Loner.
Yeah, but in large groups, that's even worse because you play the Dark Loner, you wind up by yourself while the rest of the party.
Yeah, and then you get mad because nobody's doing anything with you. But
the Dark Loner, but yeah, that's another good tip. Try not to, if you're gonna play the Dark Loner, give your character a reason for having to be with this group. Maybe they need they need the group strength to fulfill their ultimate goal, which might not be the party's goal or whatever have you.
I mean, I'll even go a bit further. With a group of 8 or 9 players, you have no business being the Dark Loner. None whatsoever.
That is true.
Because one, you just adding extra agita for the GM. Because the GM already has 8 other people he has to satisfy in the narrative. And if you want to constantly be running off on your own, it's like
it just adds trouble, yeah.
The Dark Loner character works when it's 1 or 2 players, where you could do separate scenes and concentrate a whole hour. But with a group that size, come on, dude. Like,
with a group that size, you just might as well, realize you're going to be really the true loner.
Yes, you have to be willing to help your GM on groups those sizes. You have to be willing to be a team player. I mean, I don't know how to say it any other way.
I have another piece of advice, but this is more specifically for online games. I don't know how you would go about this in a real life game, but something I like to encourage players to do in a big group, or I would like to encourage players to do, because again, I don't run for big players often or big groups often.
Next week you running 9 people. I'm getting 9 people on the CU.
Nah. But either way,
if you want to play at Al's 9 player extravaganza, put a comment down in the section below. You in, baby? You in?
I don't want to commit to anything on camera, so I'm not gonna. Anyways, so what I was saying is, let's say there's a scene going on, an RP scene, because combat usually involves a bunch of people and there's not really much else going on. But in RP scenes, let's say the 2 whatever characters are doing something with an NPC who is the GM or whatever, they're all doing something. What I like to encourage other players who are not engaged in the scene is to roll. Again, I'm assuming a voice game is going on, but most online games have a chat, like a text chat that you can use. So what I like to encourage, and I also do it myself when I'm a player in a big game and I'm not involved in a scene, I'll role play little bits of dialogue or whatever have you in the text chat. So like just to add a little bit of flavor of what's going on around them. Like maybe the 2 main whatever characters is here negotiating with a shopkeep, so I'll engage in conversation with another character who's not in the main scene, and this doesn't interrupt because we're not speaking or anything, we're just talking in text chat, and it's not altering the actions of the main 2 because we're just having basically a little bit of fun dialogue or whatever have you. There's no GM doesn't need to mediate on this. It's just fun role playing, and that again keeps the players immersed, keeps them in the headspace of their character, all that good stuff.
Nice.
Before we close out large groups, anybody want to have a statement on, what their feelings on large groups? Do they prefer them?
I don't know if I went on my take on GM negatives, but
okay.
I don't like it. That's about it. I think I said it many times. I feel like it's just too much to plan. Oh no, I did say it's too much to plan for, and like trying to give everyone enough space. Yeah, I did. I was brief on it, but yeah. So I don't think there's anything else to say.
My final statement would be very simple. It's not that I don't necessarily dislike large groups, but I don't think I want to ever do, 9, 12,
14.
But I don't want to do that again. And it's not anything against anybody, but I don't think I can give everybody their fair shake, especially if it was like a one shot or something like that. Maybe if somebody were to convince me to do like another, year or two long campaign, we were going to do it episodically, and I was only going to have, if it was 9 people, only 5 people were going to show up consistently, but it was going to be like a revolving door. I could kind of deal with that, but I don't think I want a massive group again.
I mean, I couldn't even imagine doing 14 people. Like, I would probably just quit and curl up in the corner in a little ball.
No, it'll be another semi with a whale in it.
Yeah. There'll be a whale in a trailer pulling up somewhere halfway through the first session. But I do think I don't mind large groups that much, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, I could do 6 to 7, 8 people. Is it my preferred? Probably not. But I don't get as intimidated as I used to with those size groups. I mean, I think that it's a little more work on the, at the actual table, but it's less prep before the game, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I look at it as it's the other side of the blade. Smaller group, more prep. Bigger group, less prep, but more improvisation.
And it's like, it's more table management. It's more making sure everyone is getting spotlight time, making sure everyone's involved. And I think the one thing I got from actually having this conversation that I didn't really think about, it's keeping players engaged is probably, I would think, the most important aspect of large groups. And I think it's the most difficult task of a GM. Now thinking about it, hearing your two guys talk about it, because it seems like all of us have tips and techniques that help keep players engaged. So I think that's what I took from this discussion with large groups it's probably the most important aspect.
Agreed.
And it's definitely, again, easier to lose focus as a player and to lose players' focus when you're the GM in a larger setting. So yeah, it's definitely a key skill.
Yep. All right, so now let's move on to something that I actually have least experience with, which I thought would be the opposite. Smaller groups. We're talking about groups of 1 or 2 players. The solo campaign, the duo. What are some of the perks to being a player in a smaller game?
You get to be the star more often. Every session. Come on. I think that, and I also think that you can tell much more personal stories, which I believe is freaking awesome. I mean, the list of that goes on and on, because it's going to push your limits as a player and as a GM. You're going to see what you're made of, especially if it's something that's engrossing and engaging. So, baseline perks.
Al?
I don't think I've ever actually been in a game with 1 or 2 players or run a game for 1 or 2 players.
Once again, you've done both, and I'll give you examples of both.
When did I do that?
Me and you played 2 sessions of Lasers and Feelings where you were the GM and I was the only player.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I always think of Cypher system. I never think of. Anyways,
And you and our late friend Jason played about 2 or 3 sessions of our very first superhero game on Cypher system.
oh yeah,
I,
that is true. Damn,
and it was 2 or 3 sessions, and it was only two of you playing.
my goodness, look at me, I'm a mess. But as a player in a two-person group, something that's a lot of fun. Again, I'm not thinking much more of the solo player, but more of the two-player dynamic, where you have one, like it becomes almost not, again, it depends on the tone of your game, but it becomes almost like a buddy comedy dynamic where you two are basically getting into like the wild or sitcom, where again it can have a serious tone to it, but it's just those two characters developing their relationship while they get into wild antics with one another. And that is what I feel like would be the best part of it. What was it? This guy's laughing again while I'm talking, but between two players engaged in a game with one another is that growing relationship and seeing how your two dynamic work in multiple different situations.
I'm not laughing at you, Al. You just because you just took me way back to a great time in my life. You know what? And I'm gonna put this out here now. My buddy Darren watches this show all the time. We're probably gonna have Darren come on.
Hi, Darren.
You know, Darren, you're coming on the show, and we're gonna do a whole episode on just that, the buddy gaming, because him and I have played in so many sessions together, just him and I, and the GM. You know, we developed so many little anecdotes. You know, we had Kill the Magic User. That was, you know, that was one of our set things, you know, and we did the whole buddy cop thing, you know, and we had two different kind of dynamics and the kind of characters we played. It was just pretty cool, and you just made me think about it, so it brought back real fond memories.
I think the biggest perk to a small group is that you have more input in the actual narrative of the story, you know, because like when it's just one or two players, you actually basically creating the narrative with the GM, because whatever you say becomes canon. However you feel interact with the NPCs decide whether these NPCs become important or not. You know, it's not 4 or 5 people interacting with an NPC. It's more one-on-one intimate interactions that basically shape the story. You know what I mean? So it's more of an intimate setting. You know, it's definitely a different sort of gameplay. You basically steer the story, and the GM is, you know, going along for the ride. Yeah. So I think that can be very enjoyable in some ways. You know, it could be very satisfying as a player that, you know, it's truly a group effort, you, one other person, or just you and the GM building the story together. So, I mean, I could see how a lot of people would enjoy that aspect. Yeah. So I think that's one of the perks. What's one of the hindrances? What grinds your gear as a player in a
more work?
Well, you got nobody to talk to.
Yeah, that.
Oh no, you saw what I just did. Oh no, there's nobody.
That's one take on it. You know, there's no one else to see the cool stuff that you're doing or coming up with, and that kind of leads into what I was gonna say was there's not as much feedback into what happened, so there's less chance for, not to say that you as a player aren't creative or anything like that. It's just that, again, with more people at the table, there's a bigger chance for someone to say something that's a really cool idea, again, and for any idea to be tweaked into a cool idea with more eyes. It's just a higher chance of happening than with just the 1 or 2 players. And again, I'm not saying you can't be a very creative person in a 1 or 2 person game. I'm just saying that the chances become higher for, again, you don't have to work as hard as an individual to think of something creative because you have a collective on it.
Have any of you guys ever done solo sessions? And what do
Yeah,
you feel like? Do you enjoy
yeah,
some?
I've done a couple of solo games. Like again, it kind of reminds me of what Monty Cook is doing with Invisible Sun and the directed campaigns and the offline thing. Um, and I think it's cool to a degree. Um, and player GM, like I said, that's a truly personal story. It's a personal journey. Um, I don't know if it's always I don't know if it's always as interesting, you know, because it can become extremely one dimensional. You've got a single thought process, and in those cases sometimes it can truly become player versus GM.
Yes.
Depending on the type of GM you have. It also is it's also one of those situations where um, the player has to truly be focused on the story that the GM is trying to tell. You got to be into it. You've got to be 100% into it, and vice versa. You know,
Yeah.
you have to be a couple of people who can truly feed and riff off of each other in order to make something spectacular happen. Um, I've tried it with a few people. You know, I only had one guy that really kind of got it. In that respect, as far as me being a player, which was pretty cool. Um, but I've done the intimate one-on-one sessions with other people, me as a GM or DM, or whatever, and it works. But it depends on the games too. I think
Mhm.
depending on what kind of game you're playing, because I found it worked really good with World of Darkness, with Vampire, Werewolf, Mage, those
Makes
World of
sense.
Darkness, the
Mhm.
World of Darkness, White Wolf games. It worked really great doing solo sessions, with people. And I used to do that with the group I played with. I would do solo sessions with them just to take place. So when we came together as a group, there was this true, what happened while we weren't together. That's my take.
I mean, I've played not many solo sessions. Like I said, I think I played two with Al, and maybe growing up, I played maybe another two or three. I know I actually played I want to say second edition. I played a character called Vlad Talos, and he was like an assassin character. I might have played 4 or 5 sessions. It was fun, but I'm a social person at heart, and even though my GM was great, we told a good story. It just didn't feel the same to me, you know, like it didn't feel like I was role playing. It felt like we was technically rolling dice and telling a story, but it felt more like writing a book than it did role playing. If
Yeah,
that
it
makes
makes
any
sense.
sense. So I
Me.
don't
Oh,
necessarily know if I'm a big fan of solo sessions.
yeah, I was gonna say that just to elaborate on what the feelings you're trying to express. You
Mm,
had too much input on what was going on. There
yeah.
was less unknown to you,
Yeah.
and that again, it created your boredom over the reason you don't like it or whatever have you.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, when you think about the two people playing back and forth off of each other, you know, we know our GMs.
Yeah.
You know what kind of stuff you can do, what you can trigger here or there. But it's entirely different when you got the guy sitting next to you, for those two, and really just that one extra person.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference between solo play and two people play. It's like,
Yeah, it just that one extra person makes a huge difference in the
yeah,
night. So agreed, 100%. I'm not, like I said, won't say I'm against it, but probably not something I'm just going to jump into both feet. I mean, as a matter of fact, you know what? And I forgot his name, but he's on a Cypher Unlimited server, and he was doing something relatively interesting. And I think that was really the problem. I kept losing focus because he was doing one person. He was doing them like episodes, comic book episodes,
Oh
and
yes, yes.
um, he was he came up with some decent story ideas and concepts, but it was just kind of hard to spend an hour. or two to play a session, and it was just him and I. You know, so I apologize. I can't remember your name on the server, but I do apologize that and life happened, so I had other things to do. But yeah.
But to piggyback off that, I lost my train of thought. What were we just saying?
About the solo sessions.
Solo sessions, duo sessions. Oh, if you are gonna play in them, it's kind of hard to do it with randos. Like you have to really know the people and the style of play they prefer, because it has to mesh or it's not gonna work. There's just too. If you don't mesh, if it's a solo game, you don't mesh with a GM, not gonna work. No matter how good of a player you are, no matter how good of a GM they are, if your play styles don't mesh, it's not gonna work. Same thing goes for a duo game. You and the GM might have a compatibility, but if you and the other player don't have that compatibility, it's not gonna work. It's a lot easier for these games to fail if there isn't that conducive mindset, comfortability, all those C words.
Well, like I said, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, GM is very important, but that guy sitting next to you over there is going to be the catalyst. Everybody, that whole threesome should have a good dynamic.
All right, so I think we did all the positives and negatives of solo play as a player. What can a solo player do to help the GM out?
Oh, I mean, we said this already, but to elaborate, as a solo player in a game, you're basically co-GM. Like you're telling a story with this other person. They might be controlling not controlling the outcomes, but calling the shots, as it were. But as a solo player, you also have to put in the work to make the GM's job easier. Write a backstory, write a detailed backstory, come up with organizations, come up with regions, unless the GM is specific about if they are specific, they probably have a map for you. Just pick a region, say the organizations from this place. Again, if they're comfortable with it, make up a region, make these hooks or whatever you call it, knives. I forget the terminology people use for the GM to use. And that'll make his job easier, and it'll keep you more immersed, because now when the GM brings up Snowfang Mountain or whatever that place you mentioned in your backstory, you're like, he remembered. Oh, we're actually going there now, or whatever the case may be. And again, it'll just heighten the experience for both of you.
Yep. I think that's absolutely important. You as the player have to be immersed. You have to truly be ready for it, and if you're not, then you're not doing your GM any favors, and you're not doing yourself any either.
Especially if your GM is taking the time to run a game specifically for you, catered for you. The least you could do is be committed and be fully vested into the story.
And I'll be honest with you, as a GM, people out there, so I don't necessarily write anything for a solo person, a solo player, and when I did do it, when I did run some games like that, I was asked to do it, so I had to think about it, and I did. I, made sure, look, give me stuff, because I can't just. I can write a story about a solo.
So this leads into the GM advice. So, yeah. Dean, what are some of the things you could do as a GM for a solo game that's positive and negative? What are your takes as a GM?
Well, the positive.
A small group, not necessarily a small group.
Well, the positivity is this. Small group, single, solo player. I'm going to hit your story beats. If you give me, a detailed background story, trust me, everything you reference is going to be a part of that adventure, some way, somehow. Whether we do a flashback scene, somebody comes around, whatever the case may be, that's going to happen. Also, the positive is that when players do that, it makes the job as a GM, it not only does it make it easier, but it really makes it enjoyable. because for me, my biggest enjoyment comes when the players are having such a blast, and you know what, 5 6 weeks later, they're still talking about this session, or what happened here. Love it, eat it up, can't wait to do it again. um that's my thing. And as a GM, advice to the GM is be prepared yourself. You have to be prepared. You know what? And depending on the style of your GMing, you know what? Do your prep. Do whatever it is you need to do to prep, because that's going to come in. It's going to be invaluable. When you sit behind that screen, when you sit in that position. Because I know me personally as a GM, I don't do the old-fashioned prep anymore. I stopped doing it, but I do have certain things that I like to do. If I'm running for a small group or a solo group, I have what I call my improvisational notes, and those improvisational notes are story beats that I know I will use, that I can hit, and it should continue to make everything flow. And I get those from you as the players, and so have those things, have whatever prep that you need to do. Make sure your prep is done and ready, because even in solo or small group, players are going to do the unexpected.
And my advice for the GM in this situation of, solo or duo game, and it's basically a reiteration of my, past advices. I know Dean just said to really prepare, but don't feel too pressured to prepare every fine detail. Encourage the players to make up regions, make up locations. Regions are locations. Make up organizations. Make up weird artifacts in a distant land or whatever have you. And again, without that discussion with them, they're not going to know to include that stuff in their backstories, or when they're trying to plan for maybe a next session, like what they want to do as the player in the story. It allows that immersion, and the players aren't mind readers. There's always that. You always need to have that conversation, because if you don't let them know that it's okay for them to prep some stuff like that, then I feel like a lot of players feel worried they're going to step on the GM's toes when it comes to just basically creating lore for the world, the setting.
But I will say this, though. If the players do go out of their way to create that lore, I kind of agree with Dean. You got to use it.
Oh, no, 100%.
So
it has to come into play at some point, yes.
And hear me out.
You have to prep that.
Yes.
Like, you can't just half-ass it.
No,
you know what
100%.
I mean? If they took the time to give you a organization and a location,
yep.
And let me clarify what I was saying when I said about do the prep. I wasn't saying prep every detail. I was saying do whatever your prep is.
Oh, I mean, I know, but I still like to hit that.
No. I would just want to clarify whatever your style of prepping is. So if you are the 731 person.
Yeah.
Do that. If you are, the guy who needs, names, do that. Whatever your style of prep is, just make sure you remember what your players or your player is there for. That's all I was saying with that,
Oh, good clarification.
Mm-hmm. I was writing in a few notes when you guys were talking. So I could, formulate my thoughts about small groups. Like, the first thing I'm gonna say is small group is the exact opposite of a big group to me. The PCs now are the most important part of the story. Like how I said in the opposite, how the story took precedence over the PCs in a large group. It's the exact opposite. When you have one or two players, everything should revolve around the players. Yes, you have an overarching backstory, but most of the scenes should be directly related to the players.
I gave you real quick, because you're absolutely right. And if you need a visual understanding of that concept, take the 2014 remake of Godzilla. Godzilla was, the movie's called Godzilla, but he was the background. He was not the story. The story was the soldier trying to get home to his wife and kid. You know, that was the story. That was the focus. That was a prime example of having an overarching, epic idea going on, but we stayed focused on this guy right here. So, you know, if you need help with those type ideas and concepts, turn to your movies, turn to your TV shows, because they will give you, the inspirations and the visual cues that you can actually turn into gaming cues to do that. Firefly, great for your large groups, ensemble cast, giving everybody a shot. And
Bonnie and Clyde. It's two-person.
There you go, Bonnie and Clyde. Much Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid.
Yeah. Another thing I would want to say is that NPCs have a bigger impact in a small group. So you have more of an opportunity to have more flavorful NPCs, and if your party is not a heavy combat party, this is the opportunity to put an NPC that could travel with the groups for more than one session and becomes like the pseudo sidekick or the pseudo member of the party, if you want to describe it that way. Those are tips that as a GM, and it's actually, those are the fun things as a GM you can do, because you have that reoccurring character that's creating an impact with the players, whether the comic relief,
that same piggyback, what you're saying, Tony. That's absolutely. And you as a player, if the players write that up, you as a GM, look, that's an NPC you don't have to create. You might have to put some statistics down, but
and you may not choose who the NPC is.
Right.
I guarantee you, the players will choose who's the NPC they choose to be attached.
Yep.
So you get to throw out a whole bunch of different types of personalities and different types of NPCs, and they're gonna tell you who they like. Yeah, who they like the most. I would say another note I wrote is that be prepared for combat to be more difficult. With the it was the exact opposite. Yeah, it was the exact opposite. With a larger group, combat might be easier because they cover all the bases. So it doesn't matter what system you're using and where you're pulling your monsters from, whether it's a dungeon master's guide, a monster manual or bestiary. With a larger group, they'll tend to have someone in the group is going to have the answers to whatever monster you pull out of a book. But with a smaller group, chances are that you can't use every monster from a bestiary, because one or two people are not going to cover all the bases you need. So be prepared for your combats to be more difficult.
One or two people can't fight a Tarrasque.
Yeah.
And on top of that, don't be afraid, because I know some people like to play raw, whatever have you. But in a two-player game, let's say you draw, there's a monster that catches your eye in a bestiary or a a monster manual. And again, I don't know how to modify D&D creatures, but for Cypher system, let's say again your two characters are light weapon users or whatever have you. They don't have really anything that does heavy damage, and you found this creature in a book that has armor that you really want to use. Everything else works perfectly except for the armor. Just get rid of the armor. Just say it doesn't have the armor. It balances they'll have an easier time fighting it, and it doesn't imbalance or break it, because again they're only doing 2 or so damage, so it's not gonna affect anything too much. Again, don't be afraid to modify things on the fly when you need to.
And the last note I wrote was with 2 players, 1 or 2 players, you could do the massive spotlight, theatrical. You could do the flashback scenes. You could do the dream sequences. You could do the musical numbers if you want to. Whatever crazy idea you have, now's the time to do it.
Movie montage.
Yeah, the movie montage. You could do all that, right? Because with 1 or 2 players, you have the opportunity you could do the full length, 20-minute monologue of the villain talking to the players because you only have to satisfy one or two people. So you could actually do the full-fledged movie scenes, and as a GM, I think sometimes I find those enjoyable. You know what I mean?
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I was toying with, we were actually talking about it on the site maybe a week ago, and that is like the opening epic scene in a movie, and I've done it a couple of times in game with like four people, where it's the opening action sequence, right? And it gets to a cliffhanger spot, and then I go, okay, 8 hours earlier,
Yeah.
And the first time I did it in the game, everybody's like, what? Oh, cool. So, and they got to go 8 hours earlier. So,
You know what's another thing that you could split the party with two players. Splitting the party, you should never do that with 9 players because you'll never get them back together. But with 2 players, it's super effective. There's tons of the MacGyver incident. One person is trying to defuse a bomb, and the other person is trying to get through a security gate to get to his partner while he's defusing the bomb. Those scenes you could absolutely do to great effect.
Yes.
Right.
It's very easy to bounce back and forth between 2 players, and then again keep them focused or near the same goal. Whereas with 9 players, 1 or 2 players do that, it just becomes a mess. And yeah.
And here's the other thing that with us talking about it, kind of organically bringing it all clear. The smaller groups, honestly, are what changed my method, and my thought process as a game master to starting to tell a story as opposed to playing a game against the people on the other side of the table. So, and then games like Cypher and everything else that, opened up the whole narrative, versus mechanics. Those all work in conjunction, and I think when you shift from that thought process, your method of gaming, it makes a difference too. It makes it easier, with larger and smaller groups.
All right, so I think we tackled the smaller group pretty well as a player and as a GM. What's your final thoughts on smaller groups?
Just like I said about big groups, everything has its place. I don't know if I necessarily want, just smaller groups because I do enjoy the dynamic. Personally, I'm still in the 4 to 6 player realm. If I could have, 4 players at the table on a consistent basis, I'm happy.
Al?
I'm actually going to be in a position once my significant others at home get their stuff together, for not saying the other S word, but I've been trying to get them to play Cypher system, me as the GM, them to as players. So I'll be in a position for 2-player games, and I'm hoping that it'll turn into something fun that we'll do periodically. And as a side note, I do enjoy the smaller spectrum of players. But I never go, again, I know Anthony said we played a couple of games as 2 players, but my strong preference is 3. I know we touched on 4 plus or 6 plus or 1 or 2, but I actually enjoy 3 players. Again, I feel like it's easy to spread the spotlight between 3 people. You can still split the party, so to speak. It's easy to wrangle 3 people. And again, 3 people is still 3 different mindsets, ideas, seeing one idea, spinning it into another idea, whatever have you. So you still have the creative output of a group because there's 3 people. So I feel like 3 is the sweet spot for me.
I think smaller groups are intimate experience. I think it's an experience I don't have a lot of playtime with. I'll be curious to give it another go round because I think having this discussion kind of piqued my interest a little. But I think I'd fall under the Dean category. I think 4 to 5 to 6 players is my sweet spot. I think I like a little bit of the large group and the small group combo. So I think I would, like, if I had a choice, I would probably want 5 players as my four
All
to
right,
five players.
all right. So you heard it here first, guys. Anthony's gonna run a game for just me and Dean, a two-person game, and
Absolutely.
we're gonna put it on Twitch, and that'll be the what co-star to my 9-player game. No, I'm not doing 9 players. I don't care. A million of you guys could. All right, so I will say this: if we get 100 comments in this video, I will run a 9-player game.
Let's say this: if you ran a 9 player game, what kind of game would you run?
Um, I would probably go with the standard regular fantasy or science fiction fantasy. What do you think would be a good game for 9
That's your
players?
first mistake,
First
right
mistake.
there.
First mistake. All right.
You want to run something that everybody's in one condensed area, a starship or something.
All right, all right. So it is a fantasy game, but they're on a boat journey to another place that's another continent that hasn't been explored yet. But the hard part is the whole game is the journey there. So they're on a boat the whole time, dealing with sea creatures and air mythical flying creatures and all that sorts of stuff. But they're all stuck. There's no lifeboats. They can't. They can't.
The only reason why I say that is because you got to get all these people together with 9, 10 people.
Al, I'm gonna tell you, just go to what you know. You like predation. Go to predation.
No, but that's 18 players. You're trying to have 18 characters in the game. Nah. This guy right here.
These trying to screw you even further.
So it'll be really easy controlling and paying attention to 18 different characters in the game. That'll work perfectly.
Yo, next thing he's gonna tell you, he's gonna, matter of fact, do predation and convert it to GURPS.
All right. Anyways, I think we're getting way off track here.
I'm running a Torg.
I think we've had a good talk, guys. It's been a very good talk. Did everybody get their last final thoughts on everything, or?
Yeah, I think we did. But Al, do a quick shout out because I don't think everyone noticed our new logos. Could you please explain?
Yes. So we got new logos designed, which you'll see in the opening, or you had seen in the opening, and also down below, or on the sides here. You see we have new, fresh looking stuff. Does not look like it used to look, and that is thanks to our good friends at I'm gonna butcher how to pronounce it, but Regardless or Ergagardless. That's their company name, and that's their graphic company name. And the two people are Shar and Rob. Shar's a golden one. Rob is her husband. They do excellent work, as you can see. I will be doing some layouts myself with the updated icons and stuff, so expect to see more of it. And big props to them. Thank you very much for this stuff. It's awesome. I very much appreciate it. And good stuff.
I mean, I would say they do professional work, and I can't express they went above and beyond. What
Expectations.
what we expected our logos to look like, and we're going to provide all the links down below because not only do they do logo work, they do layout work. So if you're working on any projects and need your layout work done, they're more than happy to help you with that as well. So we'll provide their website and their contact information, and hopefully more people will see our logos and want to work with them as well because they're great people.
Yes.
And last but not least, on that whole idea with the logos and images and everything, coming soon to a computer near you, Cypher Unlimited website with their own little store where you can buy Cypher Unlimited merch. It's coming.
As well as multiple articles from not only us, but from other members on our server. So hopefully we could get several people on the server to provide maybe the adventures or all sorts of things. We're kind of working out the details now, but that should be coming shortly as well.
Yeah, so got a lot of big things going forward. icon or logo update. It was just the first of many. So yeah.
Hold on, I got one more announcement. I was running an 18-person
Oh
predation
my god.
tour game in 2 weeks, so sign up on the bottom.
Predation tour game. That's awesome. Using a modified system.
Using a modified GURP system.
And only if we get 2,000 comments. 2,000 likes, 2,000 comments.
From 100 comments.
Yeah, no, but the initial one was 9-player game. Now we're doing 18 players in Tor converted GURPS. Like, where's the end? Like, but anyways, be sure to like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed what you watched, which I hope you did, or we hope you did. And be sure to hit that little bell on the bottom there to be sure that you get notifications of when we put new stuff out, because you definitely want to be on top of our new material and such. And yeah, thank you again, from the bottom of our hearts for watching our inane nonsense. Just kidding around. But yeah, from us at the CU, we will see you later.